Members of Toronto East York Community Council, could you come to Committee Room 1, please? We don't yet have quorum. If I could ask members to take their seats. Councillor Wong-Tam. Councillor Wong-Tam, if you could wrap up your conversation, please. Josh. Could you just grab her? Yeah. Good morning. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'd like to begin by gratefully acknowledging that the Toronto East York Community Council meets on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by the Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the New Credit. I'd like to begin by asking if there are any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Councillor Bradford.
Mr. Chair, on item TE 13.32, I'd like to declare a direct or indirect pecuniary interest in the agenda item in accordance with Section 5 of the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. The nature of my interest is as follows. My wife is a planner on this file.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bradford. Any others? Seeing none, Can I have a motion to confirm the minutes of January 8th, 2020? Councillor Matlow, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Members, before we do our agenda rundown, you might recall that at the last meeting, we passed a motion to consider the city's corporate security plan. Given that Council considered it at its most recent meeting, in consultation with the clerk, what I'm suggesting is that we have a presentation. Please note that we can't move any motions on this item as Council has taken a decision on it. Is that acceptable? Just do a presentation? I guess so. Take it away.
Thank you for allowing us to come and brief the Toronto East York and Community Council on how the new Council-approved enhanced security measures pertain to members of the public who will be attending the Community Council meetings. With me is Pat Matozzo, the Executive Director of CREM, and Andrew Robinson, one of the managers in corporate security, and City Hall falls under his portfolio. As you're aware, at its January meeting, City Council approved new enhanced security measures at Toronto City Hall. These measures will affect members of the public attending or deputing in at least two ways: how they enter the facility, and patron screening. Public access to the building will continue through the main doors, cafe doors, and path entrance. Public access will no longer continue to the back Hagerman doors or the northwest doors, which are also the least used doors in the building. The walk-through metal detectors currently used to access the council chamber will be relocated to the main floor, extending the safety enhancement from the chamber only to the majority of the building. Once a member of the public is screened on the main floor, no further screening is required to access the committee rooms or the chamber. The walk-through metal detectors will be located on the main floor on the west side of the Toronto At Your Service information desk. During business hours, upon entry to the main floor, a visitor will be greeted by a Toronto At Your Service representative and directed to the screening area. Signage will also be in place providing directions. These changes will commence on Tuesday, February 18th. Temporary stanchions will be used to delineate the screening area until such time as a semi-permanent glass physical measure is installed. Visitor screening is not expected to dramatically increase the time it takes a visitor to enter the building. We do, however, anticipate that the process will be slower at the initial start, especially as visitors become aware of the new procedures. Best practices, however, indicate that the screening process should average less than 15 seconds per person. This is not airport-style screening, but is similar to screening one would expect to receive prior to entering a professional sports game. Visitors can certainly assist with the screening process in a number of ways. By attending the building a few minutes before they would normally attend in order to leave time for screening. By educating themselves on what to expect. A video explaining the process of the metal detectors is located on the city's website with links available under various web pages, including the Visitors to City Hall page and the Council Committee web page. By not bringing prohibited items. A list of prohibited items is available on the city's website as well as at each screening station. This is the same list of prohibited items that we've been using at City Hall for over the last year for the baggage checks. And lastly, if there is a line, to be ready to empty their pockets of anything metal and to open their bags for screening. A formal communications plan is being followed to communicate to the many visitors, staff, and tenants regarding the security enhancements using various communication vehicles, including the city's website, social media pages, news releases, 311, and on-site signage. Advanced planning and preparation for a large amount of visitors to the building is also critical to ensure there's little delay to the screening process. Corporate security staff complete a weekly review of planned meetings and internal events for awareness of peak periods of visitor access. Should the committee chair, members of the committee, or the committee administrator Also be aware of any expected large numbers of attendees regarding a particular item. We would appreciate if notification could occur to corporate security or the acting sergeant at arms in advance so they can make the appropriate staffing adjustments to compensate for the expected peak periods. In closing, we realize these enhancements will be a change, and a period of adjustment will be required. While we have tried to anticipate possible issues based upon benchmarking and best practices, we do ask for the patience of all involved as we implement this new safety measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the presenters? No? Seeing none? Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come share that with us. Are there any comments that members want to make? Perhaps I'll say a word. As many of you know, I consider it something of a civic loss to the City of Toronto that we are compelled to put these measures in place. This isn't the fault of city staff, obviously. Council asked for these measures to be introduced, but it's a loss. This is, in my mind, the people's building, and any barrier between the people in this building, I think, is an indication of something having gone wrong. Thank you. Okay. We will begin our rundown on page 29, which is item 17. So, for TE 13.17, the feasibility of renaming Northern Linear Park to Chinese Railroad Workers Memorial Park. Councillor Cressy.
Thank you. I have an amendment, which is to consult with the foundation and to identify opportunities to recognize and commemorate and to report back. Not simply to receive, but rather to identify opportunities to properly commemorate it and report back.
Okay, so on Councillor Cressy's motion, all those in favor, opposed, that carries. Oh, yes, Councillor Wong-Tam.
Yes, thank you very much. And I just wanted to lend some support to Councillor Cressy and the efforts that he's leading in his local community to mark this historical designation. As a member of the Chinese Canadian community, we are very much aware that many of us and our forefathers and foremothers were part of nation building in Canada. Without the creation and linking of the railroad system from coast to coast, a confederation would have never happened. So this is a very important commemoration moment, and I just want to recognize that it's very significant and incredibly meaningful to the community. So thank you very much, Councillor Cressy.
Thank you. So with that, all those in favor, opposed, that carries. TE 13.18. Proposed official naming of future park at 677 Queen Street East. Councillor Bradford.
I'd like to move to approve the staff recommendations.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. TE 13.19, appointments to BIA boards of management. Anybody? Councillor Layton. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 13.20, 287 Davenport Road and 141 through 145 Bedford Road, official plan amendment, zoning amendment, and rental housing demolition applications. Preliminary report. Councillor Layton.
Yes, thank you very much. I had prepared a motion, but I was just informed by staff the expansion motions won't be necessary.
That's correct. Members, so the expansion notice is now part of the staff recommendation.
Yeah,
We've worn them down. We've had a victory.
My motion may also include the Kristen Wong-Tam snacks make for a friendlier meeting motion.
Yes, so this is the new project we have, is to wear the staff down.
So snacks may make for a friendlier meeting motion.
Yes. And members, perhaps we can take this on as our new cause and eventually wear the staff down so they write them in as part of their, no, they're saying no. The lawyers don't like that. Well, we'll just have to keep imposing it on them, won't we? Okay, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 13.21, 661, or 663 and 665 Huron Street, zoning amendment and rental housing demolition applications. Preliminary report. Councillor Layton.
Yes, thank you very much. Though there's a motion on this item too that's the same as the last motion. Should note this will be an incredibly interesting one to come back, as it's a sort of missing middle infill project on a predominantly residential single-family home street. with what could be a heritage component, but the community's been working with the developer for some time. I think there's been 3 or 4 meetings already, so I'll move the motion.
Okay, we all look forward to that. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item TE 13.22, 60 Mill Street, zoning bylaw amendment application preliminary report. I'm going to hold that for speakers. Item TE 13.23, Danforth Avenue Planning Study, City-Initiated Plan Amendment Preliminary Report, Broadview Avenue to Coxwell Avenue. We have speakers on that as well. Item TE 13.24, 6 Dawes Road, Zoning Amendment Application Preliminary Report. Councillor Bradford.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. So I have a motion I'd like to move here as well. Similarly to Councillor Layton, we included the expanded notice, which is no longer necessary. We also included the KWT snack special, so that's up there as well. And we'll just all keep working on this at TUYCC.
There you go. Very good. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item TE 13.25, Noise Exemption Permit Refusal Appealed, 18 Spadina Avenue. We have a deputant on that. Item TE 13.26, Designation of Fire Routes and Amendment to Chapter 880 Fire Routes for 125 Blue Jay Way. Councillor Cressy.
This is 13.25?
26.
26, sorry, I'm going to move staff recommendations.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item TE 13.27, Metrolinx Ontario Line, right-of-way permit process and requirements.
That noise.
I don't know what happened there. Councillor Bradford.
Thank you very much. Move staff recommendations.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item TE 13.28, construction staging.
Sorry.
Sorry?
Can I hold that item, please?
You want to hold 27?
Yes, sorry. It just
Okay, so we'll hold that in your name, Councillor.
Thank you.
Item TE 13.28, construction staging area, Sudbury Street, 1181 Queen Street. Councillor Bradford.
Just move the staff recommendations, please.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item TE 13.29, construction staging area, time extension, Armory Street, 11 and 33 Center Avenue, and 80 Chestnut Street. Councillor Cressy.
I'm going to move the staff recommendations.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item TE 13.30, construction staging area, Yorkville Avenue and Cumberland Street, 33 Yorkville Avenue and 50 Cumberland Street. Councillor Layton.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll move the recommendations in the report.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Construction TE 13.31, construction staging area, 89 and 10 to 101 Roehampton Avenue. Councillor Matlow.
So I have an amendment, just to make sure that it is washed daily on behalf of the residents. I move the recommendation with a brief comment. Isn't it remarkable that when they actually want to figure out how to keep both the road lane and the sidewalk open, that they can figure it out? It happens if people decide to become creative. And this is an example of that, and let there be many more examples of this to come.
Thank you very much. Okay, anyone else? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item TE 13.32. Okay, Councillor Bradford stepped out. Construction staging area, time extension, 13 to 7 Queen Street East. I'll move the staff recommendations. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Bradford, you're welcome back now. Item TE 13.33, installation removal of on-street accessible parking spaces, January 2020, delegated. I'll move it. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item TE 13.34, parking amendments, Queen Street West, 1181 Queen Street. Councillor Bradford.
Thanks very much. Move the staff recommendations, please.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item TE 13.35, parking amendments, Redpath Avenue and Brownlow Avenue, 71 through 73 Redpath Avenue. Councillor Matlow.
I move the staff recommendation.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item TE 13.36, parking amendments, Scott Street. Councillor Wong Tam.
Yes, thank you very much. I move the recommendations and thank staff for moving so quickly on this.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 13.37, parking amendments, Blake Street. Councillor Bradford.
Move the staff recommendations, please.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 13.38, parking amendments, Westwood Avenue. Councillor Bradford.
Move the staff recommendations, please.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 13.39, parking amendments, Cedarvale Avenue. Councillor Bradford.
Staff recommendations, please.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Councillor Bradford has a lot of opinions on parking today. Item TE 13.40, realignment of permit parking area 6N to exclude the development located at 373 Front Street East and 90 Mill Street. Councillor Wong Tam.
Yes, I'd like to move the recommendations in the staff report and note that our office will be moving similar motions like this and similar report recommendations like this moving forward. There's been over 15 years, I think, of new development in the Corktown distillery area where we were not necessarily deliberately excluding new developments from taking advantage of on-street permit parking. We have a lot of difficult conditions there. So moving forward, everyone can expect more of this from us.
Okay, look at that, done without a poll or anything. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 13.41, realignment of permit parking area 6G to exclude the development located at 203 Jarvis Street. Councillor Wong Tam.
Yes, I'd like to move the staff recommendations once again.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 13.42, realignment of permit parking area 9G. Councillor Bradford.
I'd like to move the staff recommendations, please.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. No poll there either. Item TE 13.43, payment in lieu of parking, 57 to 77 Wade Avenue. Councillor Bradford.
I'd like to move the staff recommendations, please.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 13.44, traffic control signals, Dundas Street West at Quebec Avenue. I'll move the staff recommendations. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 13.45, traffic control signals, College Street and Palmerston Avenue and Palmerston Boulevard. Councillor Layton.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll move the recommendations in the report and just note that this will help facilitate the installation of a residential street, bikeway, quiet street. I don't know if that's the technical term. I don't know what it is. A bike lane along Palmerston Avenue.
Quiet Street. I like that.
Quiet bike lane.
We're gonna start to have quiet discussions about doing that more often. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Item TE 13.46, proposed installation of speed bumps, Charlie Roach Lane. Councillor Matlow.
I move the staff recommendation.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item TE 13.47, traffic calming, speed humps, Alexander Street. Councillor Wong Tam.
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to move the alternative recommendations, and I would add that without the polling. Is that what we have on the screen? Thank you very much. And I want to thank the local community for their patience. We're doing everything we can to implement and further strengthen Vision Zero objectives in the downtown core.
Okay. On the Councillor Wong Tam's motion, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 13.48, traffic calming speed humps, Gloucester Street. Councillor Wong Tam.
Again, I'd like to move the alternative recommendations without the requirement for polling.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 13.49, traffic calming, speed humps, Isabella Street. Councillor Wong Tam.
Thank you. This is our last one. Once again, I'd like to move the alternative recommendations and also without the requirement for polling.
Okay. On the motion, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 13.50, traffic calming, speed humps, Harris Avenue. Councillor Bradford.
Thanks very much. I would like to just move to install.
Okay, so on Councillor Bradford's motions, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 13.51, speed hump poll results, Lonsdale Avenue. Councillor Matlow.
So I'm going to do something slightly different. I'm going to move a motion, which is an alternate to the alternate motion, only because the alternate motion that was written by staff had a technical error. So you'll see it on the screen.
It's within your rights to move any motion you want, Councillor. We'll judge you for it.
That's our process. And it is to approve the installation, and it just to make sure that the speed limit is correct rather than the technical error in this staff alternative recommendation.
So that's in section 3.
That's right.
Okay. All right. On the motion, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 13.52, speed hump poll results, Glenwood Crescent. Councillor Bradford.
Thanks very much. I'd like to move an alternative recommendation to install.
This is alternate to the polling. Okay. All right, so on Councillor Bradford's motion, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 13.53. Oh, the recipient of the Agnes MacPhail Award. Normally Councillor Fletcher would do that, but Councillor Bradford, you get that honor.
Thanks very much. I'd also like to note it's Award 14 and 19 as well. And motion to approve, please.
Okay, all those in favor, opposed, that's carried. Congratulations to Paula Davies and Raymond White. And thank you for all they've done for the borough of East York. Item TE 13.54, use of Nathan Phillips Square for various events from April 1st, 2020 to July 31st, 2020. Councillor Cressy.
I'm going to move the recommendations in the letter.
Okay. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Do we have anything to add to the agenda? Okay. I need a motion to introduce items 5.5 through 5.9. Councillor Layton, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Why don't we just deal with them now? Item TE 13.55, implementation of permit parking, Beverly Street between Darcy Street and Baldwin Street. There's a recommendation in the letter. All those in favor, opposed?
Could I just point out one thing?
Absolutely.
If you go to page 2 of my motion, it gives the parking permit poll results. And this just speaks to the fact that polls aren't the most effective way to do this. If you look at the distribution, we sent out 41 ballots. 10 were to invalid addresses, however that came about. So the number of ballots received by voters was 31. We only needed 8 to come back, but only 6 did. 4 were in favor, but then I don't understand the results, because if 6 came back, why were only 4 counted in favor and none against? And unless 2 were spoiled, which is a horribly high level of spoilage, given we only got 6 back. And so it didn't meet any of the requirements. All of them came back in favor. So the polling is not always the most effective means of doing this. We have received a petition signed by most of the neighbors, far greater than 4, and we're happy to proceed.
I'll take your thoughts on polling under
It's
advisement,
crazy.
Councillor.
Yeah, don't rely on.
I'm sure there's a lesson there for all of us. Okay, so on the recommendation in Councillor Layton's letter, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 13.56, implementation of permit parking on Little Norway Crescent between Queens Quay and Stadium Road. There is a recommendation from Councillor Cressy.
I'll move the recommendation in my letter.
Move it? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item TE 13.56, implementation of permit, no, what? I got 2 copies of that. I don't have a 5.7 though. Is there a 5.7? Talk amongst yourselves. Okay. All right. Okay, on item TE 13.57, parking amendments, Carr Street. There's a recommendation in a letter from Councillor Cressy.
I would like to move the recommendations in my letter, please.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 13.58, request to review 49 Heath Street West for inclusion on the city's heritage register. There's a recommendation from Councillor Matlow.
And I would like to move that.
I'm shocked. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 13.59, new business request speed limit reduction on Roundtree Avenue, Chambers Avenue, Rosethorn Avenue, and Turnbury Avenue to 30 kilometers. There are 4 recommendations in the letter from Councillor Bailao. Councillor Bradford?
I'd like to move the recommendations in the letter, please.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Okay, so that gets us through everything I have in the rundown. So we will return to our timed items, beginning with TE 13.1, renaming of a portion of Blue Jay Way between Spadina Avenue and Navy Wharf Court. I have listed Mark Lazoyan. Well, come on up and tell me how to get it right, Mark. Just have a seat there. There's a button in front of your microphone. If it's lit up, you're good. If it's not, just press it. You'll have 5 minutes, and you can watch the clock over here on the wall to the right. Thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thank you so much, Councillor Perks, for acknowledging me. Thank you, Councillor Matlow, Councillor Layton, best councillor in Toronto, Councillor Wong-Tam, Councillor Bradford.
I'm voting no now.
I came here to tell the truth. I like what I know. Anyways, Councillor Bradford, Councillor Cressy, thank you very much for being here today. Thank you for listening to me. I'm sorry to be here for this reason, but as I read the report for action, I find that there is a major error in this report and that it does not conform with city policy. On page 2 of the report, it says these naming proposals comply with the City of Toronto street naming policy, which can be found at. And I took the time to read the naming policy, and I find that section 3.8.1 says that street names, including ceremonial names, shall not result in or be perceived to confer any competitive advantage, benefit, or preferential treatment or advertisement to the named party or a product, service, or a particular business. City Place is a private development. It's not a social housing project. I believe they're putting up condos on the proposed City Place Way right now. They're trying to sell them in competition with other developers. I think there's no doubt that this would be perceived to confer a competitive advantage or preferential treatment to the named party, product, service, or particular business. So I think that's a big mistake. I also think there's a second major error, maybe even bigger than the first one, which is section 3.7 of the street naming policy says that all city costs involved in renaming a street shall be the responsibility of the applicant. Nevertheless, in the report for action, financial impact, it says the cost to install street name signage is approximately $500 and is included within the Transportation Services Division operating budget. This is a huge problem. I mean, we shouldn't be giving public money when the applicant should be paying. So I think that this report, again, it's got major flaws. Again, page 2, it says the naming proposals comply with the City of Toronto's street naming policy. And at the very least, I feel that the Director of Engineering Support Services, who signed this document, should give his opinion as to why he believes it does comply with the street name policy before you approve it, before you give a handout of a public asset to, what could be perceived to be preferential treatment for a particular business. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the deputant? No? Mark, thank you so much for your comments today. Are there any other members of the public who wish to make a deputation on this item? Seeing none, are there any questions of staff? No? To speak, Councillor Cressy?
Thank you. And I have a motion already prepared to defer this for one cycle, as not all stakeholders have been consulted with.
On the deferral, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 13.2, 41 Wabash Avenue, zoning amendment final report. Mark Kitely. Mark? I don't think I saw Mark. Oh, yeah, there you are. Come on up. How are you doing today?
I feel under the weather, but it's a little.
It's going around. Just have a seat anywhere you like. Are you going to want to project? Okay, so if you sit in that seat, maybe we can get some AV assistance for you. Yeah, good. And this serves as a reminder, members of the public, if you want to project anything during your deputation, perhaps prior to doing that, you can alert the clerk so we can make sure that you're properly set up and everything will run smoothly. In the meantime, does anyone have any comments on the Democratic primaries? Quite a show, huh? I don't like the caucus system. Any other thoughts? Anybody? No? Councillor Cressy?
I mean, it strikes me that in an attempt to be overly transparent, they have created uncertainty and distrust in the democratic process. So good intentions resulted in the opposite of what they said.
I have an amendment to that.
Yeah.
If we are ever to choose an app to assist with the running of any electoral process, let's make sure that our clerks check that app before we use it so that it doesn't become a national embarrassment.
And perhaps not, have the vendor's name be Shadow Inc. That might be some. Are you set up now?
Yeah.
Okay,
Councillor
great.
Perks, I'm going to,
So
unfortunately.
you've got, just a sec. So you got 5 minutes and you can watch your time over there, okay?
Okay, well,
There you go.
point of procedure, I was the image guy, and Alana, who's my friend and neighbor, was going to take on the substance of our input. Together, okay. So Alana's coming. Okay. Well, yeah. So I'll just set it off and pass over to Alana. We're here to respond to the 41 Wabash zoning amendment. I'm a local resident, basketball aficionado, and as we know, the court at the Charles G. Williams is a very much loved court, top 10 court in Toronto, and unfortunately, it's in dilapidated state, but in the upcoming park refurb, the basketball court is within the context of that whole refurb, so it's going to be maintained. And we just wanted to speak on the zoning amendment application, and Alana's going to speak to some of our concerns.
I had timed exactly 5 minutes, so is it, okay. So good morning, Councillor Perks, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to respond to the final report of the zoning amendment for 41 Wabash Avenue. I'm a resident of the neighborhood as well as volunteer chair of the Friends of Charles G. Williams Park. It's the park which abuts the city's west property line. It's a well-used, well-loved park. Drainage and accessibility issues, well-worn equipment have prompted the city to undertake a renovation scheduled for August of this year. Our volunteer resident group was formed in 2017. We're dedicated to advocating for the community in the lead up to the planned renovation. We've worked to collect community input through surveys, design charrettes, newsletters, public events, neighborhood outreach, park cleanups, hosted community events such as basketball skills workshops for youth, and we've been collaborating with the city PFR department. The refurbishment will include expanding the playground area to mitigate the current overcrowding, resurfacing the basketball court, the addition of a bocce court, and changing the wading pool to a splash pad to accommodate more all-ages play. Our summary of concerns has been noted in the final report being discussed today. We're encouraged to know that our letter writing and petition earmarking several negative impacts that should be discussed have been acknowledged. I'll review them here and followed by a couple questions. So the basketball court and all play activities. The untenable distance between the basketball court and the front yards and entrances of the new townhomes creates issues with free and fun play, adds a constant concern over the ball going over towards the homes, the ever-present feeling that you are invading the public space of these 4-story towers. The basketball courts are well used by all ages and the neighborhood values them greatly. Players have expressed particular concern over the risk of stray balls damaging the proposed property. Playful, normal use of a basketball court is inherently noisy. The interests of those using this space are very much in conflict with those who will be living 16 feet away from the court. There's precedent for this type of conflict, as Councillor Bailao can attest. At McGregor Park, for example, the Downtown Toronto Softball Association approached the city with their concerns 2 years before the conflict arose. The U.S. Trust for Public Land considers basketball hoops one of the 6 amenities important to their Park Score Index because they serve all levels of activity, desires, and ages of users. The wall. The removal of the existing 12-foot wall will no doubt affect the user experience of the park, and not just in the area of the basketball court. Over 300 respondents through a survey accessed online and distributed via hard copy of the park unanimously answer that removing the existing wall and exposing the park to the townhomes in such close proximity would not enhance their or their family's park experience. The wall in its current state is not a particularly attractive asset to the park, although it's worth noting that a great mural by Street Art Toronto could change that in a heartbeat. When viewed within the context of the park, the wall makes sense. The sight lines through the park are clear. They're not hampered in any way. The wall is not blocking public access. It's protecting the nature of the play activities in the park. The main park amenities, which bookend the south and north ends of the park, encourage activities by all ages and at various hours of the day and evening. As for the importance of parks, on page 13 of the final report being discussed today, the city acknowledges that our urban parks perform a critical function and that sustaining public park activities is essential. Having illustrated the defining circumstances around the importance of this buffer between the public park and the private property, my questions are thus. Is the installation of a 36-inch high, 91-centimeter vertical wrought iron fence proposed by the city the best choice, the most appropriate choice to run along most of the property line? How is this short permeable fence going to address the concerns stated here and at all previous written petitions and community discussions? Why aren't we replicating the existing wall's dimensions? If the city decrees publicly accessible spaces are deemed an integral part of our quality of life and social well-being, why can't it offer exact, purpose-built specifications for the buffer of the basketball court? If the park and the activities it fosters are so important, why is it so hard to commit to a buffer which definitively sets out to do this? We've received in writing from the councillor's office that a barrier will be maintained. The developer has indicated that a 7-foot solid wall will be installed, and this final report indicates that a, quote, taller screening element in the area of the basketball court will be required. No specifications on height, length, materiality, permeability have
Lana,
ever
I'm
been
going to ask you
indicated.
for your final thought.
We have all the advantages of foresight at this juncture. The community will take no satisfaction in saying, I told you so, as the Downtown Toronto Softball Association can attest.
Okay.
Hindsight will
I'm
give
going
no
to have to ask
benefit
you to
us.
stop there. Thank you so much. Are there any questions for the deputy? No? Alana, actually, I do have a question for either of you.
Okay.
So, as the staff report says,
Yes.
the specifications of the barrier that are going to be discussed is something that takes place during what's called the site plan process.
Absolutely.
Which is the next step. We don't
Great.
do in this level of detail.
Fair enough.
So would it help in any way if we undertake to make sure that the community is engaged in the conversation during the site plan process about how that barrier would work? Is that valuable?
Yes, if
Yeah?
it's meaningful
Okay.
and not, the decision hasn't been made ahead of if it is collaborative and we
Yeah.
are involved, then yes, I would say
Okay.
obviously that would be of use to the community.
Thank you so much. Okay. Are there any other members of the public who wish to make a deputation on this side? Oh, sorry, I had someone else listed. Louis Tinker from Bousfields. Good morning, Louis. You know the deal, right?
Good morning.
Settle in.
Good morning, Chair, members
Great.
of Community Council. My
Thank
name
you
is
so
Louis
much.
Tinker. I'm a planner at Bousfields, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant and owner of 41 Wabash Avenue, Curated Properties. Just very quickly, if I could get access to the screen. Just to provide a little bit more context to some of the comments that have been made and some of the discussion points in the staff report. The site is just located on the south side of Wabash Avenue, immediately to the east of the Charles G. Williams Park And through this process, the Parks Department have asked for an on-site parkland dedication to essentially widen the Charles G. Park in an east-west dimension. It would be widened by 1.5 meters of an on-site parkland dedication, and included in that is a condition that the edge condition, the barrier, the wall that should separate between the development site and the new park, expanded park, is to be worked out through the site plan process. The site today is currently occupied by a 3-story former industrial and warehouse building with a single story at the rear. The building itself has been determined to have contextual historical value, and as such, a recommendation was adopted by Toronto Preservation Board last week to designate the existing structure. The existing structure will be altered to add an additional single story above the existing structure. You'll see here the view from Wabash Avenue here, the additional 1 story above. And then to the rear of the existing structure will be a series of 4-story townhouses, which will front onto the new expanded park area. Essentially, the proposal meets all of the city's requirements in terms of neighborhood policies. There is a 5.5-meter rear yard setback to the abutting neighborhoods to the south of the subject site. There is a 5.5-meter setback to the mutual property line to our neighbor to the east, which is also a 4-story residential development. You can see highlighted in red the area of the existing building to be retained. We've illustrated on this site plan as well the strip of new parkland, 1.5 meters, that is to be dedicated and conveyed to the city. We agree with the recommendation to undertake further consultation around the actual design, materiality, and extent of the barrier or wall between the development site and the basketball court. We certainly heard that through what I thought was a collaborative consultation, both in terms of pre-application consultation and during the process as well. And we certainly encourage you to adopt staff's recommendations and thank both staff and the ward councillor. And I'm available to answer any particular questions that you might have.
Thank you. Members, any questions? No? So I just want to, I thought I heard it, but I just want to nail it down. You're willing, your client is willing to engage with the community, my office, and the planning department in a conversation on the materiality and dimensions of the fence between the basketball court and the property.
That is correct, yes.
All right, there we go, all nailed down. Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who wish to make a deputation on this item? Seeing none, any questions of staff? No? Okay, I'll speak. I move that we adopt the staff report. And with great thanks to Kirk and the rest of the team from planning on handling a very complex and very sensitive local issue. Part of the conversation here had to do with a memorial mural that I think city staff handled very well, as well as all the other complex issues of bringing 4-story housing into a neighborhood next to a park. I know if this was any other community council, people would be falling over when having heart attacks and all of that, but we just do it as routine business here. So thank you very much to Kirk and the rest of the team. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item TE 13.3, 191 through 201 Church Street, zoning amendment application final report. Are there any members of the public who wish to make a deputation on this item? Seeing none. Councillor Wong-Tam? With 13.7? Okay, just give me a second here. Right. Okay, so members, to members of the public, there is a related item here, which is the item TE 13.7, the intention to designate under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, alterations to a heritage property and authority to enter into a heritage easement agreement at 191, 193, 195, and 197 Church Street. So I'm going to call to see if there are any members of the public who have comments on that report. No? Seeing none? On the two related items then, Councillor Wong-Tam, do you have any questions of staff or?
Yes, I do, and
Okay.
these questions are related regarding the heritage alteration request from the applicant. I understand that there was a very robust discussion at the Preservation Board, and I recognize that Councillor Layton was not there, so I'm trying to understand exactly what transpired. So there is correspondence from the Preservation Board that has flagged some concerns, and to make sure that we are all fully understanding what those concerns are, I'm just going to probably try to contextualize those questions and repeat them today. So my question to staff starts off with, where is this application in relationship to St. Michael's Cathedral Basilica?
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Wong-Tam. The subject property is on the opposite side of Church Street to the north of the cathedral. So the cathedral is at Shooter and Church, whereas 191 through 197 Church Street are mid-block properties on the opposite side of the street to the north.
So in the correspondence from the Toronto Preservation Board, they stated that the application and the basilica were directly across the street from each other. It seems to be that it's not exactly the case, but rather the basilica is on the south side of Shooter Street, and so therefore it's south of the application, kitty corner to the application, but not directly across the street. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, Councillor, thank you. And by the way, I should introduce myself as Joe Muller with Heritage Planning.
Thank you very much, Joe. And with respect to the concerns that members had regarding whether or not staff, heritage preservation staff, did their due diligence to review the application in context to St. Michael's Cathedral, there is some concern that perhaps staff didn't do a fulsome job. How would you respond to that?
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Wong-Tam. I would beg to differ that staff did, in fact, take this into consideration as we identified this as an adjacent property within the analysis, although we also took into the consideration that its close proximity rather than adjacency was a factor. But I would say that staff did take this into due consideration in the evaluation and recommendations.
Can you share with Community Council what does that consideration and adequate review look like? Were there images that were shown? Did you ask for additional supporting documentation for the application for alteration? Were there particular area context drawings that you saw that perhaps the Preservation Board did not get a chance to see?
Through the chair, so we, on I guess pages 12 through 15 of the staff report, we do indicate essentially the immediate context with mapping in the site plan and of some renderings, three-dimensional renderings. And to be honest, given the distance of the cathedral from the subject property, I believe that we did have a look at renderings for the block in general, but because of the distance, we didn't add that information to the report, and in future, I think that would be an oversight that we would address.
So it sounds like you would be rejecting the statement from the Preservation Board that you did not treat this application with the same consideration as preservation staff did when they were considering heritage contexts and adjacencies with the St. James Cathedral. Would you agree to that? Because there is claims that you didn't give it the same due diligence.
Through the chair, I would beg to differ with the opinion offered in the letter that we did give it due consideration for the conservation of the heritage value on the subject site and of adjacent properties. And I think we've addressed those fairly substantially through the setback from the street wall of the proposed tower, and in addition, removal of the southern portion of that new proposed structure to create more buffer and breathing space between the tower proposed and adjacent heritage.
So therefore, just to summarize, you stand by the recommendations in the staff report, and you are in supportive of the applicant's request to alter the heritage property as part of their development. Is that correct?
Councillor, through the chair, yes, I stand by the recommendations and support the proposed development.
And would your recommendations stand the tests around the and any type of appeal?
Well, that's subject to appeal, so I would not want to prejudge the possible outcome, but I would certainly, in my usual perspective on decisions like this, I would be happy to defend this decision before the LPAT.
And I guess my final question is, have you heard any objections from St. Michael's Cathedral Basilica or their administration?
Through the chair, no, we have received no objections.
Okay. But they were part of, obviously, the notification area. This was through the public planning process.
Through the chair, yes, they would have been part of the notification process.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Any further questions of staff? No? To speak? Councillor Wong Tam?
Yes, thank you. I would like to, I should probably move my motions first. With respect to item number 13.3, which is the application for the rezoning, is to move the staff recommendations. And with respect to item...
Let's just do that one first. All those in favor, post carried. Okay.
All those in, sorry, I was about to do your job. And with respect to item number 7, which is the intention to designate the subject properties and to approve the alterations, what I'd like to do is move the recommendations from the Preservation Board, identifying approval of recommendation 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the original staff report, but obviously supported by the Preservation Board. And then move the recommendations 5, 6, and 7 in the Heritage Staff Report, which is to approve the alteration requests. And I want to thank staff for doing their work, both planning staff as well as heritage staff, transportation, and everyone else who's been involved with the process. I recognize that the debate that transpired at the Preservation Board, and I apologize because I was not necessarily there. I'm no longer a member of that Preservation Board. But I do want to make sure that the Preservation Board is given as much consideration, and their opinions are deeply valued, as myself, who has been a former member for 8 years of that board. So I needed to satisfy myself to the fact that any particular concerns that the heritage preservation staff perhaps may have erred in their judgment was going to be satisfied today in this particular forum. And I'm very satisfied with the answers from staff. I want to thank them for their due diligence. I know that this application did not necessarily just fly through quickly. It literally took many months, and it was a drawn-out process as we tussled with how to fit this application into the particular area, but also recognizing that there is a lot of significant history contextual requirements that had to be considered. I think that it's important for us to recognize that density is going to come into the downtown core. We are designated for growth, and we continue to manage the growth, so therefore we can have adequate green space and farmland to grow the food and the agriculture that we need to sustain human life in the GTHA and beyond. So when we take on that additional density and that additional growth, we want to do the very best that we can to make sure that it is going to be carefully sustainable, but also it's going to fit into the area context. I want to thank the developer, because I know that for the members of the Garden District Residents Association, they were very supportive, and it should be noted that they were extremely supportive of this application. They did not come out and say no. They came out and said, how do they get to the yes? And I know that the applicant worked very hard to make sure that every area resident concerns were dealt with. Those who lived on Dalhousie, those who lived on Church Street, the north and south adjacencies, all of that was considered. And that takes time and energy, and I just want to thank them for working so respectfully with the community and also being so patient and working respectfully from staff. I think it's a good application. The entire Section 37 component is going directly to affordable housing or investments in community facilities and recreation spaces. So overall, I consider this a very good development for this particular neighborhood.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So we already took the item 3 on item 7 as amended. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Thank you very much. So next we go to TE 13.4, 507 King Street East rental housing demolition application, final report. Felix Wedgwood. Felix, are you here? I am. Good morning, Felix. How are you? Very well, thank you. And you?
Just getting over hernia surgery,
Just a sec, let everybody settle. Just one sec before you launch in. If we could, I know that there's a bunch of people, it's almost like shift change or something. We could just have quiet so that we can pay attention to what Felix is going to say to us. I feel like we should install a punch clock over there. And people just punch in and out for the different items. Yeah. Okay. Felix, so you have 5 minutes. You can watch your time over here on the wall to my right. Please start.
Hello, everyone. My name is Felix Wedgwood. I'm a photographer, and I live and work at 507 King Street East. And I'm speaking for myself today and the other people that live at 507 King Street East. And they're here behind me, Bruce Bunt, Alan Chandler, Gary Helps, Norman Lacko, and Jason Crawford. I just want to let you know that we never received an invite to this meeting, and I understand that's part of the process. We found out about it through an ad in The Sun, which was given to one of the residents on a chance meeting. So hopefully, moving forward in the process, we can get notices of important meetings that are coming up, and there are several of them, as I understand it. I'd like to thank everyone for being here, though I do wonder why we are here having this discussion, frankly, for this application to demolish rental units. These are homes. These are people's primary residences. Think about your home for a minute. Our homes are being taken away from us. And this application is pointless because 16 of these recognized units have already been destroyed. Like these, if the photograph could actually show up, but that's a picture of a demolished floor. I can leave these photographs for people who want to look at it. 9 of the 16 units have been either completely destroyed or partially destroyed. So why are we talking about this application in front of the Community Council and in front of City Council at the end of the month? It's already happened. So what is the point of this? It seems to me that all it is an exchange of money between the developer and the city. Because that's what the application, that's the form of the application. It lists clearly all the sums of money that have to be exchanged. And every time we've spoken to our representative, and we've spoken to many of them, the response we've gotten is, just take the money and leave. Go away. We are just too busy to deal with you. There has been absolutely no rehousing offered in this proposal. It's simply take the money and leave. We're too busy to deal with you. Homelessness costs the city $5,000 per person every year and reduce that individual's life expectancy by 20 years. Think about that. We are artists, and we live in a building that is in the cultural precinct of the downtown plan, which I happen to have a section of right here. And that plan refers to this cultural precinct. In the policies, it lists 12.5. The King Spadina and King Parliament Cultural Precinct are shown in the map. We are right in the middle of the King Spadina precinct. Here we go. Within the King Spadina and King Parliament cultural precincts, the following will be encouraged. Policy 12.6.1, the clustering of cultural industries and cultural sector economic activities, jobs, and cultural spaces. 12.6.2, building attributes that support the spatial requirements of creative industries and cultural sector and allow for flexible use of the spaces, which is exactly what we're doing right now. So what is it? It's all about money, isn't it? We're currently paying $17.80 a square foot on average. After the East Room and Hallmark have done their proposal, the general public will be charged $350 per square foot per year. So my rent, I pay right now $2,450 a month. After Hallmark has had their way, that will be $17,150 a month.
So Felix, you've come to the end of your time. Do you have a final thought you'd like to share with us?
How does this support the official plan? And in closing, I'd like to say housing is a human right, not an investment.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Are there any questions for the deputy? No? Seeing none, are there any other members, excuse me, are there any other members of the public who wish to make a deputation on this item? Yes. If you could come up and identify yourself.
Well, good morning. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Tom Halinsky. I'm a lawyer with Aird & Burles, and I act for Hallmark. I'm pleased to say that I've been involved in this process throughout in the many discussions with your staff and negotiating the term sheet and discussing this proposal. We're happy to be here in support of the staff recommendation. And what our client proposes to do, as you saw from the report, is to make a very substantial capital investment in this quite elderly building now in order to restore it and add to it and enable it to continue to serve the uses that it's been zoned for since time immemorial, and those uses are industrial. As you saw from the report, residential uses are not permitted on that site.
Artist live work is, sorry.
Sir, if I could just, each person gets an opportunity to address the committee and we don't interrupt them, okay?
Thank you. So as I noted, the industrial uses are, there's a wide range of industrial uses contemplated and permitted on that site. Residential uses are not. There's a very narrow of artist live work uses that are permitted. None of the current tenancies meet that anywhere near that definition. There is work ongoing in the building. All of that work is as permitted by current outstanding permits. The tenants certainly have not been reticent about calling in building inspectors who've been through the building many, many times. They've confirmed that there is all of the work is going in accordance with the plans and issued permits. In terms of Mr. Wedgwood's comments about payments, the payments are in accordance with the term sheet and the standard terms in the term sheet. They are going to the tenants rather than to the city, and Mr. Kloot has been involved in working out that term sheet with our client. It's complete. We're pleased to support it. We've met with, obviously, staff many times. We've also met with the tenants, both as a large group and with smaller groups of tenants, several times, exchanged many emails with them, and are prepared to continue to discuss things with them as this process continues. But in the meantime, we would ask that you adopt the recommendation of your staff, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any questions of the deputy? No? Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who wish to address the committee on this item? Seeing none, questions of staff? Oh, yes, do come up. Take a seat. Take a seat. Just sit down.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Sit down here, or?
Yes, please. Right there. Yeah. And if you could just tell us your name?
Yeah, it's Gary Helps.
Okay, Gary, so you'll have 5 minutes to address us, and you can watch your time over here on the wall to my right.
Thank you. I just want to mention that the zoning of the building at 507 King Street East has been industrial live work. And as was stated, we are residents of that building. There seems to be a problem with the definition of live work there. It would suggest that we are entitled as residents to be there as live work because that's the situation that we're in. I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you so much. Are any questions of the deputant? No? Are there any other members of the public who wish to make a deputation on this item? Seeing none, are there any questions of staff? Councillor Wong-Tam.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, and thank you to all the deputants who appeared before us today. This is a particular file that my staff and I have struggled with. We are going to rely very heavily on the advice of our professional planning staff. But I do have some questions I'd like to have clarified before us today. The staff report stipulates that the subject property is zoned in the industrial district known as sort of I-1D3. And as such, residential uses are not permitted. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And so the permitted uses, as of right, are industrial workspace and manufacturing uses. Is that correct?
Those are two of the non-residential uses that are permitted, yes.
How would you respond to the to two of at least the deputants' concerns and claims that another permitted use is live workspace?
My understanding of the bylaw is that residential uses are not a permitted use, but there is within the non-residential use category, there is an opportunity for a form of, I believe it is an artist live work, which we would interpret to be essentially an ancillary function to one of the industrial or manufacturing uses.
So therefore, even though technically it's not a strict residential permitted use, there is some language that allows for artists or sort of creative uses live workspace. The tenants and deputants who've appeared before us today are suggesting and stating very passionately to not tear down their homes. What is the city response? What is the staff recommendation before us today?
The city response and staff recommendation is that residential uses are not a permitted use. The site is zoned under an I-1D3 industrial district zoning category, and the landowner has not filed a zoning amendment application to introduce the permission for residential uses. So therefore, what our process is through the residential demo bylaw is we have recognized the existing tenants on the property and secured a tenant relocation and assistance package because replacing residential uses on the lands is not an option.
And in order for the landlord to permit, legally obtain permissions to allow for residential dwelling use in the future, they would have to submit a rezoning application to rezone the property. Is that correct?
That's correct, and we also have included as a condition of approval that should the applicant at any point within the next 15 years file an application to introduce residential uses, that they would be required to replace all of the 12 existing rental dwelling units that currently are.
Except for that doesn't necessarily help the existing tenants who are living in this building today, does it?
No, it does not, which is why we have pursued a tenant relocation and assistance package.
So in light of the fact that you are pursuing this sort of tenant relocation and assistance package, despite the fact that city planning is not recognizing residential use in this building because it's not permitted in the current zoning, why is it that you are on one hand saying residential uses are not permitted, but while we see that there are tenants who are living in this unpermitted, unzoned, or sort of off-zone building because it's not permitted, why are you providing this assistance? Because if you don't have to do it, then why are you doing it?
We're doing that. We are actually, we are recognizing that people have lived in this building for years and that they are, this is their home and they are being relocated. And while we cannot compel the lands to be rezoned, we do recognize the residential tenants, and so we do provide an assistance package for them.
And what would it take for city planning to make a recommendation to rezone the property? Is that something that city planning would do?
It typically would not be something we would pursue, typically as sort of as on an ad hoc individual site basis. If there was a determination and a desire to perhaps open up residential opportunities in the area. Yep, and my colleague will speak to that.
Through the chair, Councillor, there is obviously an exercise that's ongoing right now in terms of the King Parliament secondary plan review. And as part of that, there will be a revisiting of the zoning in this general area and all throughout the King Parliament area, as you probably know. So that will be an opportunity at that point to look at future uses. But as my colleague has said, right now, the current zoning for this property does not allow for the residential use.
Thank you. And with respect to this particular report, it's not accompanied with anything else, so there is no alteration to the building. There is obviously no rezoning final report. It's simply a tenant, the demolition and tenant assistance report. What exactly permissions is the applicant seeking?
My understanding is that the applicant is pursuing office-type uses on the lands, which are permitted.
Which are currently permitted. And that's going through a minor variance application, is that correct?
There is a minor variance application. I believe it relates to an elevator overrun and perhaps some parking.
And so what is the tenant relocation assistance package that staff are recommending? Can you itemize that for us?
So outlined on page 4 of the staff report under the tenant assistance plan, it includes at least 5 months' notice of the date they must vacate their rental unit, compensation equal to 3 months' rent pursuant to the Residential Tenancies Act, a $1,500 moving allowance to move out, as well as additional compensation based on length of tenure within the building, and at the discretion of the chief planner, any additional compensation or assistance for special needs tenants.
Can you explain what additional compensation based on the length of tenure within the building means?
Typically what we do is we take a look at tenants who have lived there a long time, and we essentially will bump up the compensation package depending on the number of years that they have lived there.
So therefore, would it be a straight formula of perhaps for every year residing there, you get an additional 1 month of compensation? Is that how it works?
And I'm just reading just 1 moment, please. My apologies. So the is at least 10 years. So an amount equal to 5 months' rent for anyone whose tenancy is less than 5 years. An amount equal to 6 month rent whose tenancy is between 5 and 10 years, 7 months rent for 10 to 15 years, 8 months rent, 15 to 20, 10 months rent, 20 to 30, 12 months rent beyond 30.
And can you, are the rents as it sits today, are any of the rents affordable housing quantums? Just trying to understand, what is the average rent?
My understanding is that one of them meets the affordable housing threshold.
And is that the owner's dwelling?
I don't believe so.
And then the rest of the rents, are they market rents, above market rents? What are we looking at here?
Approximately mid-range.
Mid-range. Okay. And this is the very best you can do. Is there any other recourse that the tenants can take?
And this is sort of an unfortunate situation in terms of our abilities under the Chapter 667 of the Municipal Code. This is the extent to which we can assist.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chair. I recognize you gave me some extra time there.
Take all the time you need. Are there any other questions of staff? No? Councillor Wong Tam?
Thank you. I'm going to move the recommendations in the staff report, and I do so with, to be quite honest, with a heavy heart. This has been a very difficult file for everyone to grapple with, especially those in my office who have been meeting with some of the tenants and sort of listening to their concerns. The challenge before us is that we don't necessarily, I don't know if it's because we don't necessarily have a policy that's comprehensive enough to sort of grab these sort of loopholes, but just like the rooming house policy that we didn't necessarily have in place, there was a group of very vulnerable tenants, especially in the rooming house situation. It is on the low end of the rental spectrum, and we had a very difficult time to protect that type of housing stock. I recognize that this is not exactly the same, and especially since we have what seems to be a new prospect, a new owner who has purchased this particular building without fully recognizing that there were people who were living there. So what they purchased was a warehouse that was largely with some type of creative uses, mostly industrial manufacturing and light manufacturing. And when they took possession, they then realized that there were folks living there. So for some reason, I think that I believe there was some dishonesty from the original owner, who then sold to this particular applicant and didn't disclose fully what was going on within the building. So you can't go back in time. It's really hard to do because it's not necessarily the new owner's fault that this is something that they walked into. But at the same time, we have folks who have been calling this building their home for a number of years, who are now faced with a situation where they're stuck in a conundrum because we have a planning regime that doesn't quite address this particular piece. So in this case, I actually don't see any villains here. I think everyone is trying to do their job, but unfortunately there's a system and a structure that doesn't quite adequately address everyone's concerns and needs. I recognize that especially our housing staff, they have been working really hard, and I know that this has been a difficult file for them as well because they're trying to do everything they can without the proper policy mechanisms to push and pull. So they're using the tools that they have to compel what seems to be a willing property owner who kind of inherited the situation without fully knowing what was before them, and everyone is struggling in this turmoil as they're pitching around. We don't have a policy fix. I can't create one on the fly. The only thing that we're left with is to follow the advice of the staff recommendation, but also to encourage continued dialogue with the tenants and their new landlord. And if there's a way to find if there's a way to address this, we would like to address this. I know staff would, I know I would, but we don't have an immediate fix today. And that's why I say I move this with a heavy heart, because it's been a big struggle for us. We didn't know how to particularly bind this together. But I also want to just say that I particularly don't think that there's any one stakeholder that walked into any of this that wanted to inflict intentional harm. That I'm very confident of. And I know that staff have done everything they possibly can to try to provide supports for the tenants, and this is kind of where we are. I apologize that we couldn't necessarily do better today.
Okay, any questions of the mover? No, seeing none. Anyone else to speak? All right, then on the item, all those in favor, opposed, carried. All right, that takes us to TE 13.5, 925 Dawes Road, zoning bylaw amendment application request for directions report. Are there any members of the public who wish to make a deputation on this item? Seeing none. Any questions of staff? No? Councillor Bradford?
Just like to move the staff recommendations, please.
On the staff recommendations, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 13.6, inclusion on the City of Toronto Heritage Register and intention to designate under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, alterations to a heritage property and authority to enter into a heritage easement agreement, 41 Wabash Avenue. Say that 6 times fast. Are there any members of the public who wish to make a deputation on this item? Seeing none, I'll move the staff recommendations. All those in favor, opposed, carried. 7 we've done. Item TE 13.8, amendment of a designating bylaw, alterations to a designated heritage property and authority to enter into a heritage easement agreement 197 King Street East. Are there any members of the public who wish to make a deputation on this item? Seeing none, are there any questions of staff? No. I believe this is Councillor Cressy? No, it's Councillor Wong Tam. Councillor Wong Tam, item 8.
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to move the staff recommendations and to thank everyone involved with this process. And of course, also in thanking the Preservation Board.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Yes, please.
I just don't understand, if I could just get clarification. On the Wabash item, just for an example.
Yes.
Why do we consider the heritage question after we either deny or approve the development application?
We typically try to do them both together. Sometimes your chair is alert and on the ball, and other times he's not.
So may I suggest, because we do have a wonderful chair who I'm speaking with.
Oh, you're very kind.
Perhaps we should consider those items either at the same time or before we consider the...
I'm aware of that, and when we do our agenda briefing, where we set the agenda, it's often before we have the report in from Preservation Board Services, so there's just, it's messy and complicated to make the agenda work perfectly. There's also issues around notifying the public. That has to go out in advance of the meeting. And finally, because they're different decisions, they have to be placed as separate items on the agenda. So while I appreciate
the best of the clerk's ability.
The failure here, I want to be clear, does not lie with the planning department, does not lie with Heritage Services, it does not lie with the clerk, it lies solely with me. I apologize, Councillor Mann.
Well, thank you, and to the sword that you just fell on, I appreciate you actively listening to the concern. Thank you.
I was all ears. Okay. Now that we're all through that very complicated moment, I believe I'm on 9, right? Yeah. Item TE 13.9, partial repeal and amendment of designating bylaw 158 Sterling Road. Are there any members of the public who wish to make a deputation on that item? I see none. Are there any questions of staff? No. Councillor Bradford.
Move the staff recommendations, please.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 13.10, request to demolish the residential building 160 Bathurst Street. I have a deputant, Deanna Scrow. Hi, is that you? Yes. Hi, come on up.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of council.
Okay. Please proceed. You have 5 minutes.
My name is Deanna Scrow. I'm a lawyer. I'm here on behalf of the owner, Mrs. Rena Acaputo. I want to start by thanking staff, in particular Sam Sarkosh, who helped us get this matter before you. The request before you is a demolition permit, and we are before you because we don't have a building permit application filed. The owner of the property is a widow. Her spouse passed away in November. They have owned the property since 1964. In March of 2019, they had entered, or were about to, on the eve of entering into an agreement of purchase and sale of the property, and tragedy ensued. You may know that the properties were burnt down. In fact, the tragedy was so severe that a young man passed. Hence, we're here almost a year later, dealing with insurance, always fun, and in a situation where the current owner would like to sell the property, and to sell the property, the buildings need to be demolished. That's the backstory. The facts before you involve an engineer's report and a subsequent report. That report was prepared for the insurer. The report speaks to demolition as appropriate in the circumstances, and I wanted to make myself available this morning on behalf of the owner, should you have any questions. Thank you.
Deanna, I see you're listed again. You're on the next item, which is 162. Are your remarks cover
Correct.
both?
The submissions for both are exactly
All right.
identical, and the only thing I would add is I understand you have a decision to make based on 3 recommendations. The owner, of course, would ask that you pursue recommendation or adopt recommendation number 2, which is to approve the application to demolish the vacant residential building without any conditions.
Okay. Thank you for that. Are there any other members of the public who wish to make a deputation on either 160 Bathurst or 162 Bathurst? Seeing none. Are there questions of staff? No? Councillor Cressy.
Thank you, Chair. And I will be moving recommendation 3, which is to approve the demolition with conditions. Just for members of the committee background, there was a tragic fire that occurred here, and a fire that resulted in, unfortunately, the loss of life and a large community outpouring of support and fundraising for tenants as well afterwards. Forensic engineering has been retained. They've assessed the damage and have recommended that the buildings be demolished. And so it's on that basis that we are recommending this, though, of course, it is with conditions so that it's demolished but properly fenced and sodded as opposed to sitting there fallow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so on this item, all those in favor of the councillor's recommendations, all those opposed, that carries. On item 11, are there any, I called for deputants on this already, but I'll do it one more time. Are there any members of the public that wish to make a deputation on this item? Seeing none, questions to staff? No. Councillor Cressy.
And again, I will be moving recommendation 3. This is the adjacent home, and it is again to permit demolition with conditions to ensure that rubble is cleared, fencing is up, and sod is put down.
Okay, all those in favor, opposed, carried. That takes us to item TE 13.12, residential demolition application 399 Dundas Street West. Are there any members of the public who wish to make a deputation on this item? Seeing none. Questions of staff? None. Councillor Cressy?
I will be moving staff recommendation number 3, which again is to approve the demolition with conditions.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 13.13, rental demolition, residential demolition application 136 Lyndhurst Avenue. Are there any members of the public who wish to make a deputation on this item? Yes, please. Okay. If you could tell us who you are, please.
My name is Robert Levy. I'm the president of the Casa Loma Residents Association.
Good morning, Robert. You'll have 5 minutes to address us, and you can watch your time over here on the wall to my right.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity to address the council. I'm here with kind of to, I think, discuss a novel approach to finding a balance between supporting owners' rights to build what they want while preserving unique character of our uncontestedly important Casa Loma area. While we might be one of the most historical areas in the city, I think the residents who live there are some of the most innovative and open to adaptive kind of evolution to finding the right balance. So I wanted to just share some facts without dispute. Casa Loma area was selected as a priority area for heritage designation with an HCD study funded by the city and taxpayer dollars. The HCD process was widely communicated, was a very public process, including prominence on our own website, theclratoronto.com. I would encourage you all to visit that site because it has some fantastic documents about our history. The report was made public on July 12, 2018, included 2 complete streets and a limited number of special properties identified for further study as contributing properties. 136 Lyndhurst, one of the oldest houses and original houses on the street, is one of those select contributing properties that was identified by the independent heritage consultants. There are also significant old-growth heritage trees that would be negatively impacted should there be a demolition and a new build. We also, in addition, retained an independent heritage architect who also confirmed that some of the flamboyant window design elements are not only unique to the Casa Loma area, but citywide, as well the front porch and brick, and additionally unique elements of this special arts and crafts home. At a meeting facilitated by Councillor Matlow with the owner and his architect, they did confirm they were fully aware of the HCD study, even though these properties are not yet listed. We understand that. After the demolition notice went up, the CLRA executive member, one of our members, was told by the workers on the site that they were hoping to obtain a demolition permit during the holiday season when no one was around, trying to circumvent the public HCD process and making sure not to share their proposed plans with their neighbors until we objected. The CLRA strongly supports adaptive reuse of heritage structures, and we've successfully achieved this with 7 Austin Terrace and 72 Wells Hill, where only the facade elements are retained with significant alterations accepted by the CLRA and Heritage Services to allow the owner to build their magnificent home that they built without destroying the character and presence on the street. We would like to assist the owner with his plans for a new home and only request that the facade be kept and incorporated into the new home. Just look at 72 Wells Hill to see how it can be done in a way that gives the owner his new home they deserve while preserving the contributing heritage to this unique, important area, which the owners have already admitted they value and appreciate, which is why they wanted to buy their home here. So please suspend the demolition application until we have a chance to constructively negotiate a solution that helps preserve the unique character of our special Casa Loma area. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the deputant? No? Thank you so much for your time this morning. Are there any other members? Oh, I see someone jumping up. Are you on this item? Yeah? You could just tell us who you are. Not that we don't know, but it's...
Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of Community Council. My name is Eileen Costello. I'm a solicitor at Eric Burles, and I'm counsel to Matthew Curtin, who's the owner of the property. You have correspondence from me dated February 3rd, 2020, which also encloses a visual illustrating for you the proposed new home on the property. And I wanted to just address some of the comments from Mr. Levy. I'd also note Community Council has, I think, 9 or 10 pieces of correspondence from immediate neighbors in the area who have indicated that they have no objection to the demolition application, and in fact, they take issue with Mr. Levy's comments in terms of him representing the entire community. I don't want to get into that right now. What I want to do is talk about, as Mr. Levy indicated, the undisputed facts. There was a heritage HCD process which was commenced in 2005 with the City Council identifying this area. The study itself came forward in 2018. The study and staff's recommendation did not include this street. It recommended 2 HCD studies, Wells Street and Hill Street, I believe, didn't include this street at all in the HCD recommendation. So staff's first determination with respect to heritage was to not include this street in the HCD study. The second determination, which Mr. Levy speaks to, he references this property being identified as contributing. That's not the case. The study lists every single property on Lyndhurst and says it should be reviewed. It doesn't identify it as a contributing property, and of course it couldn't because there isn't an HCD for it to contribute to. This street is not included in the HCD. The third piece is the suggestion that my client or representatives of my client knew about any of this. You know, respectfully, processes are well publicized, but if you've purchased a property in July of 2019, which is when my client purchased his property, that was a year after the HCD study had come to Toronto Preservation Board, there was no public notice of that, and there's certainly nothing registered on title to my client's property. So when my client's real estate solicitor did his title search, there was nothing to indicate there was any heritage issue for this property. The third piece, and I think it's equally important, is the suggestion that my client has acted somehow in bad faith or inappropriately. My client filed a zoning review last summer. This file has been under process with the City of Toronto planning and building staff for more than 6 months. A zoning review confirmed that no variances are required for this property. My client went through a back and forth with staff to get to a design of a home which doesn't require a single variance. And how often, Councillor, does that happen in this neighborhood and in your ward? Not often. So my client worked diligently with planning staff to get to the point where he was, by virtue of your own bylaw, designing a house which maintains the nature and character of the neighborhood, because that's what the City of Toronto zoning bylaw does. And once that zoning review was completed, my client then filed his application for a replacement building permit first, and then upon request from City of Toronto staff filed his application for a demolition permit. So my client's done nothing wrong here. There was no attempt to mislead the community. And when you don't require minor variances, there is not an obligation to share the plans of your new home with your neighbors. So the suggestion that my client should have come forward and done that in advance, I don't think is reasonable or fair. So we're here in a circumstance where my client's done nothing wrong. It's done everything it was asked to do. It met with Mr. Levy with the councillor's assistance and guidance, and we thank the councillor for that. But I think the suggestion that the front facade of a home which is neither listed nor designated be the starting point for this proposal is not reasonable. And I think heritage preservation staff would take issue with that as an approach to heritage from the outset. So we're respectfully requesting that staff recommendation number 3, which is to approve the demolition permit with condition, be adopted. We're respectfully requesting that this matter not be deferred or delayed any further, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the deputy? Seeing none? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Sorry, sir, you've had your time. Okay. We have to follow our process here. Are there any other members of the public who wish to make a deputation on this item? Seeing none, are there any questions of staff? Councillor Matlow?
Through you to, to Heritage Planning, can I just confirm that that Lyndhurst was indeed part of the initial HCD study for the Castelloma neighborhood?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, yes, the original study included a wider area, but the recommendation for the actual when council approved undertaking an HCD study for the Castelloma area, they did include a wider area, but following consultant report, that was honed down into a smaller area that didn't include Lyndhurst.
Okay, but Lyndhurst was part of the initial HCD study, so the residents were aware that it was part of the wider consideration. And is it not true that that the study was to be completed by the end of 2019?
The study was to be completed the end of last year, but that didn't take place. We have put out an RFP, I think it's just put out maybe yesterday, to undertake the HCD study for Wells Avenue. So that should be starting shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Matlow?
I have a motion which I'm going to explain to you, which is the first recommendation to refuse the application to demolish the two-story detached dwelling at 136 Lyndhurst Avenue because there is no permit to replace the building on the site at this time. So, God, this has been a weird one and a difficult one. There are, as the representative for the owner correctly stated, rarely, if ever, do I find, and I imagine you have the same experiences, where you have somebody wanting to redevelop a home without requesting minor variances and going to committee of adjustment. And now, while those things are by nature more controversial often in a neighborhood and more difficult to deal with, the silver lining of that process is that there is a process, that there's a process triggered to notify local residents, and then often you can begin that often difficult, uncomfortable, sometimes contentious, but helpful discussion so that perhaps you can resolve things and perhaps at least lead to a mediated settlement or cut it off before it gets to the hearing. In this case, because the owner didn't request any variances, that wasn't triggered. And the Castelloma Residents Association, along with neighbors, were left in the dark because a process doesn't exist to provide them that light. No fault of the owner. There was no onus on him to reach out to the neighbors. He wouldn't have known what he was supposed to do. I believe he did actually reach out to the adjacent neighbors, and I think he did make effort to do his due diligence. But the wider community was unaware of what was going on. So I can empathize with their perspective that when they hear that there's someone wanting to redevelop a property, that they hear about it over the holidays, nonetheless, that they started the work earlier, but that's when this came to light in the community, that the first thing that comes to, I think, a lot of people's minds with a dearth of information is, the information, the worry that they fill that gap with, which is this going to be another one of those builders, which we are accustomed to in Midtown, and I know across the city, that is just doing something surreptitious. They want to kind of get in there and demolish something and then build something big later and go to committee after the fact. They were worried about all this, and they didn't know Matthew Curtin. So CLRA wrote a letter raising opposition, and this is why it was bumped up to Community Council. I reached out to both Matthew and to Robert in the CLRA, and I asked them, and I think the way I phrased it is, let's do what any reasonable grown-up would do, which is before this turns into a big community fight, let's actually sit down and meet at my office and see if we can resolve the differences. The differences, the delta was small, remarkably. I did not hear the CLRA say that they were completely opposed to any type of demolition. I did not hear that they were opposed to every and anything. What they were saying was, we want to see if there are even some features on the design to ensure that the characteristics of this home in particular and how it contributes to the wider neighborhood are protected in whatever new design would be considered. What I also heard from Mr. Curtin was that, while he did sit there and actively listen to Mr. Levy's submission to him or his request to him, that he also had a very clear vision about what he wanted his home to be like. And with credit to Mr. Curtin, he wasn't going to, and Mr. Levy and CLRA hadn't seen this design, but he wasn't considering doing something that had stucco around or one of those box houses that look like a iPhone. He really was looking at, I think, very thoughtful features such as brick facade all around, etc. So I wanted to give him that credit. But there was a remaining difference of opinion about the design and how it would contribute or take away from the character of the neighborhood. The HCD study, the timeline of the study and the lack of completion of the study by the end of the date, this is important, I think led to ambiguity that created a bit of a mess here. No fault of staff. We asked them to do a lot of things without enough resources to get it done. But they did not have the resources to get this HCD study done within the time period that they had selected initially. And what this led to is a lot of concern by the community that without the completion of the study, there wouldn't be any conclusive opinion about what should become of this home and the community. Ultimately, Heritage Planning did say that they do not believe that this house will contribute to, that it doesn't merit a designation under the Ontario Heritage Act, and therefore we cannot request that it be protected because they are not recommending that. So the only thing that I've got left in these recommendations is that I cannot support a demolition without a permit to replace the building. That being said, I've got to make it very clear. There is nothing in the toolbox that the city has that can prevent an owner of a property to build a new home unless it is designated under the Ontario Heritage Act. The last thing I want to mention, and I know that we want to conclude this item, is that I've spoken with the Heritage Planning staff, and they've committed to meet with my office and the CLRA to make a very clear plan about this study, its timeline, what our expectations are, to ensure that the character of this neighborhood is protected. And I would hope that Mr. Curtin, as a new neighbor, would want to also be part of that journey, because ultimately what my greatest hope is that a resolution will still be able to be found between neighbors so that there is both a respect for the owner moving in, but also a respect for the character of the neighborhood that Mr. Curtin is moving into. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the mover? No? Anyone else to speak to the item? No? On the motion, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Okay, that takes us to, the front yard parking appeal portion of the meeting. Mercifully, there's only one this time. TE 13.14, front yard parking appeal, 978 St. Clarence Avenue. Are there any members of the public who wish to make an application on this or deputation on this item? Seeing none, questions of staff? Seeing none, Councillor Bradford, I believe.
Mercifully, we'll defer this, move to defer this.
Everyone's a winner. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Matt. Oh, no, sorry, I do have 5. Sorry. Yeah, okay. TE 13.15, refusal of a Boulevard Cafe permit application located at 2261 Queen Street East, Hammersmith Avenue flankage. Are there any members of the public who wish to make a deputation on this item? Seeing none, are there any questions of staff? Seeing none, Councillor Bradford.
I have a motion here to defer this for 2 cycles. We just need to do a bit more work and consultation on this.
Okay, on the motion to defer, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 13.16, refusal of a Boulevard Cafe permit application located at 3104 Dundas Street West, Clendenin Avenue flankage. I believe, yes, I have a motion on this to withdraw the item, as the applicant's intention is to resubmit in a way that comes into conformity with the city's requirements. So if I could just have that. Motion to withdraw. My motion is blank. Anyway, oh no, it says at the top, withdraw an item. So I'm moving that we withdraw this item from the agenda. All those in favor, opposed, carried. No, it says at the top, withdraw item. Yeah, I know, it puzzled me at first too. Always take the clerk's word. Okay. Item TE 13.17, oh, we did this, no? No, we didn't. Item TE 13.17, feasibility of, we did do it. What have we got left? Okay, so now we're going to go through the held items. Item TE 13.22, 60 Mill Street zoning bylaw amendment application preliminary report. I have a deputant, Dan Phillips. Dan, if you could come forward. Good morning. Have a seat. You'll have 5 minutes, and you can watch your time over here on the wall to my right.
I don't actually need 5 minutes. It's really just a request to not consider this item again, because the first time that it was considered, it was refused, and eventually a compromise was reached to match the height of the building next door to it, 70 Mill Street. So it's really just a request because I live in 70 Mill Street. It's gone through the ringer once already, and it'd be nice not to have to go through it again. That's it. Thanks. Yeah.
You're my favorite deputant of the day.
Anything I can
Are there any questions of the deputant? No, seeing none. Are there any other members of the public who wish to make a deputation on this item? Seeing none. Are there, what's this? Could you identify yourself, sir?
Certainly can. My name is Mario Angelucci. I'm the Director of Development with Easton's Group of Hotels. It's a very brief deputation. We filed a brand new application for this property. We recently purchased this property. We're very excited to be able to consider bringing a much-needed hotel amenity to the area and to the city to help bolster the tourism industry. This project will create somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 new jobs, which is much needed, and also, like I said, assist the tourism industry in Toronto. We are committed to working with staff collaboratively.
Better be.
Absolutely. 100%. We're committed to working with staff collaboratively through the process and working with the councillor's office and everyone involved to come to bring back to life a building which has been vacant for many years. It's the last heritage building in the Distillery District that has not yet been repurposed. and it has significant challenges in repurposing it, and we're up to the challenge, and we look forward to working with everybody to bring it back to life.
Okay. Are there any questions of Mario? It is kind of weird, right? I mean, in a sense, I have about 100 questions, but none of them pertain to this item. So, thank you very much for your deputation, and it was nice to see you again. Are there any other members of the public who wish to make a deputation on this item? Seeing none, are there questions of staff? No. This one is Councillor Wong-Tam.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you to the deputants for coming out today. Very strange to see Mario on the other side of the fence. I'd like to move my motion, and my motion is to amend the staff recommendation. Obviously, the expansion of notification area is already included, but I also think it's important to make sure that when meetings are being held in the evening, that we provide as many accommodations as possible for those busy residents, and that requires some snacks to keep them sustained, because they may be rushing from work, and at the very least we can do is provide them with some food and light beverages, and also childcare and sign language interpretation if it's required. And I know that people, our council members here have suggested that it be a snack clause, but really it is to ensure that we extend a level of respect to residents when we're asking them to come out and participate in the planning process. Already it's very difficult, extremely challenging for residents to always come out. Application after application is submitted. We ask them to come out again, meeting after meeting, to provide us their advice, and oftentimes it's not even with a glass of water. So for parents who have young children, we need to provide child care accommodations. For people who require specific sign language interpretation or perhaps captioning, it's the very least we can do to ensure that there is equitable access to the process. And I'll look forward to having that public discussion with the community. I know there are significant concerns with the application. I heard very loud and clear. And I know that I guess the applicant will have to really sharpen their pencil to work on this one to make sure that they can not just address the community concerns, but also the concerns around planning staff as well. And thank you for that.
Thank you. Any questions of the mover? No. Anyone else to speak? No. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Item TE 13.23, Danforth Avenue Planning Study, City-Initiated Official Plan Amendment.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Sorry. Oh, did I do something wrong? Oh, okay. Motion to reopen. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
So the second motion to the amendment beyond the accommodations piece was also to direct staff to work with Transportation Services, Parks, Forestry, Recreation, and any other necessary city officials to create a working group and to consult the local community as part of the site plan process. Oftentimes, we're delegating these site plan matters directly to staff. Over the practice of my tenure here in the second term, I have been undelegating every site plan application. It is a significant body of work, but considering the application or review process around rezoning, and then we sort of just gloss over the site plan. Over the past 6 years, we've decided that that was not the right approach. So I'm trying something new. We're going to get staff to lead the site plan working group and to make sure that they can bring the interdivisional approach to it. And once we're satisfied with the site plan approach, where there is going to be proper vetting with the community, and that includes a construction, traffic management plan, ensuring that we get the highest quality public realm investments, that the building materials are going to be agreeable to the community as well as to urban design, and consideration around lighting and CPTED principles, the crime prevention through environmental design principles. All that has got to be embedded in the site plan, and then, and only then, will we undelegate it from staff after all the benefits have been secured on behalf of the community. And I want to thank members of the committee for letting me reopen the matter. All those in favor?
Hey. I have the gavel. Okay, but I'm not going to use it. So, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item is amended. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. Now we get to TE 13.23, Danforth Avenue Planning Study, City-Initiated Official Plan Amendment, Preliminary Report, Broadview Avenue to Coxwell Avenue. We have a deputant. Gideon, where are you? Hi. Come on up. I just wanted to say, Gideon and anyone else from the community, Councillor Fletcher had intended to attend this meeting. She's quite ill and at home, otherwise she would be here.
Sorry to hear that, Mr. Chair.
Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You noted that Mr. Phillips was your favorite deputant. I hope to be your second favorite. I will keep my remarks brief as well. But thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm a Gideon Foreman with the David Suzuki Foundation. I'm here to say we're happy that the Danforth study is considering on-street cycling facilities. We think they're an excellent idea and urge you to build a protected bike lane pilot on Danforth this year. Obviously, bike lanes have many health and environmental benefits, especially given the climate emergency, but we also believe they bust congestion and they support local merchants. And we're not the only folks who have that view. Cycling is now receiving support from some unlikely places, including one of the world's most respected consulting firms, Deloitte, and that's part of my message to you today. You may have seen this report that Deloitte brought out late 2019, their Technology, Media, and Telecommunications Predictions 2020 report. Makes for good reading. And Deloitte says that by 2022, we'll see tens of billions of more bike trips globally, translating into, quote, fewer car trips and lower emissions with spillover benefits for traffic congestion, unquote. So that's right, folks. The consulting giant Deloitte says that getting people out of cars and onto a bike busts congestion. It's not just the tree huggers who are saying that now, but the big guys. But the company believes, and this is important, that it will be difficult to realize cycling's benefits unless cities create safer infrastructure. The report says, and I quote, "Many people who might otherwise embrace cycling are frightened off by the prospect of sharing a crowded road with big metal vehicles," unquote. Deloitte suggests that bikes need their own section of the road, and in our view, that means physically separated lanes. Would cycle tracks also be consistent with a good climate for business? Experts suggest the answer is yes. A 2019 study from Toronto's Centre for Active Transportation looked at the economic impact of placing pilot bike lanes on Bloor Street. You may have seen their study. It also makes for good reading. And the key finding from that 2019 study is, and I quote, "Monthly customer spending and number of customers served by merchants both increased on Bloor Street during the pilot," unquote. The research was done on Bloor, but we think the results are suggestive for Danforth because the two streets are similar. Over 80% of their visitors arrive without an automobile. Finally, let me mention that in addition to the other virtues of bike lanes, they are really popular with your constituents. Polling done just last month by Eco Research found that bike lanes are supported by 82% of East York residents, and in the old city of Toronto, support for the lanes rises to 83%. You may have seen the polling. It got a fair bit of coverage in January on the CBC. So in conclusion, we urge Council to build a bike lane pilot on Danforth this year so that the East End can enjoy the congestion busting and business benefits that these lanes can bring, in addition to, of course, the benefits for our environment. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Gideon? Nope, seeing none. Oh,
very quick.
Councillor Bradford.
Thanks very much for the deputation coming
Pleasure.
out today. Have you had a chance, or David Suzuki Foundation, to consult with residents groups, local businesses in the East End, Ward 14 and Ward 19?
We've had some discussions, Councillor. Yes, we've certainly met with the Danny BIA. We've talked to local groups in the area. Yes, we have. We've had those discussions, and not just myself, but the broader movement has, yes.
So if you're calling for a pilot in 2020, and certainly I've heard that from a number of residents groups, businesses, is there an opportunity for more consultation between now and the summertime of 2020 where you could go out and speak with folks and listen to their feedback?
Yes, there certainly would be, and it'd be a good thing. We'd be happy to be part of it.
Okay. And then lastly, in the fall, we declared a climate emergency here at City Hall. Is that something that we need to, would you suggest when considering active transportation, bike lanes, pedestrianism, that is the sort of lens that we need to take to our infrastructure?
Absolutely, Councillor. If you look at Ontario's emissions, the largest single source is transportation. We need to help people find alternatives, Councillor, to the private gas-powered car. Bike lanes and walking are two really good alternatives.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, are there any other questions? Nope, seeing none. Gideon, nice to see you again.
Thank you,
Thank you
Mr.
for your
Chair,
deputation. Are there any other members of the public who, pardon me? Oh, we should each get like a little gold star we get to give out, right? And whoever gets the most gold stars wins. Are there any other members of the public who wish to make a deputation on this item? I see none. Questions of staff? No? To speak? Councillor Bradford.
Thanks. I'm going to be moving to approve the staff recommendations here, and would like to thank staff for all the work to date and recognize that we have a lot more to do, but we've got a great team and looking forward to getting this done. Thanks very much.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. TE 13.25 Noise Exemption Permit Refusal Appeal 18 Spadina Avenue. Jeff Merkar. Good morning, Jeff. So please, take it away.
Good morning. Thank you. My name is Jeff Merkar, and I'm the Senior Project Manager for Ellis Don Corporation, who are currently co-constructing the well project, which is located on the corner of Front Street and Spadina. I'm here today as Ellis Don is committed to working with the City of Toronto, the Community Council, and the neighbors of our project to seek a mutually agreeable solution to our noise exemption application. I'd like to start with a bit of background on our application. The well is a multi-building complex with Ellis Don constructing 2 of the 7 buildings in the complex. Our buildings are the ones right on the corner of Front and Spadina, and our co-construction manager, Delterra, is building the other 5 buildings further west. On November 14th, 2019, Ellis Don submitted a noise exemption application for the following activities with durations into the spring of 2021. We were requesting from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. The construction hoist and tower crane startup and safety activities. We were also requesting from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. the delivery of reinforcing steel and hoisting up to the top floor. All these activities are quiet activities using electric tower cranes, electric hoists, but I'll get to more details as I progress here. We're also looking for or requesting from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. the ability to install curtain wall on our building, and from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. To receive deliveries and move the materials up to the floors via the material hoist and crane. Our original application was rejected on November 21st, and it was due to a counselor who rejected our application, and we reached out to the counselor's office to find out why our application was rejected and try to work with the counselor and the community to find a mutually agreeable solution to our application. On November 26th, we also submitted our noise exemption appeal. On the 9th of December, we heard back from the counselor's office, and the reason we received was that we needed to get substantial community support before the appeal would be considered. So along those lines, I just wanted to say that before we submitted our application for a noise exemption, we engaged Air Acoustics Engineering to complete a noise impact study in the community. They put monitoring stations around the site, 5 of them, and monitored the ambient noise in the community for a period of 2 weeks. They then took this information, modeled the ambient noise in the neighborhood against our proposed construction activities outside of the bylaw hours, and through their analysis, they've determined that the proposed activities will result in minimal impact east of the site, basically Spadina Way, south of the site, across the tracks and the Telegram Mews, but there will be slightly noticeable noise north of the site on Wellington and west towards Draper. In our report, we also proposed mitigation plans, and the mitigation plan is operational limits. So by reducing duty cycle, not having overlapping activities, we propose to limit the impact to the neighbors. In addition to those proposed mitigation strategies, we've already we've already incorporated mitigation strategies into the current construction work we're doing. We've located our construction hoists and our loading dock on the Front Street side, which is away from all the neighboring buildings. We've located our concrete pumping operation within the building to further contain the sound. So I'm here today just to reiterate that we are here to work with everyone involved and are open to looking at any one of the following items to assist in our request. We are willing to look at reducing the hours of work from our application, the duration of the work or the type we are completing if required. We'd be open to doing this on a trial basis with noise levels monitored by a third-party agency. And if those noise levels being generated are not acceptable, we would stop the work and reevaluate the request. We are open to having noise monitoring conducted by the city as outlined by the bylaw. We are willing to install permanent noise sensors on the surrounding buildings to record noise levels. And then Ellis Don traffic control staff will be trained to reduce the backup time of trucks entering the site off hours. We are willing to put up a...
Jeff, you're a little bit over time. Could I ask you to wrap up, please?
Yes. I am basically at the end of my speech here. So we're here to work with the community to hopefully get this application approved.
Thank you. I'm going to thank you. I'm going to have to stop you there.
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Are there any questions of the deputant? Seeing none, thank you very much for your time today. Are there any other members of the public who wish to make a deputation on this item? Please come forward.
My name is Graham Thompson.
Graham?
Graham, Grahame.
Okay, Graham. So you'll have 5 minutes and you can watch your time on the wall clock to my right.
Yeah, okay. I live at 397 Front Street, which is just kitty corner from the well construction site. And we already deal in our building with a lot of noise. Traffic gridlock is a big problem at Front and Spadina. The train corridor, which is necessary, I know, so that people can come and go to work. But the proposed work schedule till 11 o'clock in the evening is going to might seriously impact the quality of life of those of us who live at 397 Front Street West. So I hope the appeal isn't viewed favorably. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No? Are there any other members of the public, well, there's no one else in the room, who want to make a deputation on this? Seeing none. Questions of staff? Councillor Cressy.
Thank you, and I have a motion to defer this indefinitely to allow the applicant time to work with the neighborhood. Just some history, and it was alluded to. My office was informed of this request initially. We suggested that conversations take place with the neighborhood, specifically the Draper Street Residents Association and the Wellington Place Neighborhood Association. Those conversations didn't take place. An application was put in. We denied it. Now an appeal has come in. We have suggested to the applicant to work with the community to do that necessary outreach. And the motion here to defer indefinitely, we will bring it back when that work has taken place. This is a large site. It's got 7 buildings. It's an enormous mixed-use site. An incredibly collaborative process was done to approve the rezoning. I would suggest a similar type of collaborative process should be done if there are going to be changes to construction. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of the mover? Anyone else to speak on the item? Seeing none. On the motion to defer, all those in favor, opposed, carried. That brings us to TE 13.27, Metrolinx Ontario line, right-of-way permit processes and requirements. Are there any members of the public who wish to make a deputation on this item? Seeing none. Questions of staff? Councillor Wong-Tam.
Yes, I want to understand this, and thank you, staff, for the report. It's a little light. It's 4 pages, but I think it's going to have big impact in the local community. So I just want to understand this better. So, with respect to the 24-hour overnight construction, It seems to me that if Metrolinx is asking for that 24-hour construction, the only thing they have to do is provide 3 days of working notice in advance of that work, and they get that permit. Is that correct?
Through the chair, Councilman Wong Tam, thank you for the question. I'll introduce myself as Navi Tatkar, Manager of Transit Infrastructure Projects Unit in Transportation Services. Our unit basically issues permits for all the construction-related activities associated with the Metrolinx projects. So likewise, we issue permits for the Ontario line as well. For your question, work extending up to 24 hours, and Metrolinx is required to notify the homeowners or affected businesses 3 days prior to undertaking that work, and that is Chapter 743 requirement from the city's municipal code.
And is that the only condition? So therefore, as long as you give the residents 3 working days notice, permission is just granted, permit is issued?
This is not the only condition. We can impose any condition on the contractor, any communication needs that we foresee that they need to follow. We can always include that as a permit condition. So if we need to extend this notification to, let's say, 5 days or even 2 weeks, we can do that.
Can you deny the application?
Yes, we can deny the application. We review the work, we review the work plan, and if with the councillor's office consultation, more time is needed to approach the residents or neighbors or review the construction methodology, definitely we can defer that.
And so because the Ontario line route alignment technology station placements are not fully defined, we don't have any final plans before us, but we do know that portions of it will be above ground and portions will be below ground. The adjacencies to neighborhoods will have varying meter distances. For the areas that are going to be above ground, and there are going to be some, that's already been stated by the province, what would be the mitigation efforts that you and the city staff and your division would undertake to protect the residents in the area? So they have access to some adequate sleep, also recognizing that people work shift, so there might be hospital workers or those who work in other type of those industries. Like, what other measures are you taking to protect them?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Wong Tam. Through the chair, we have been doing on the LRT projects or on the GO expansion projects, we have been asking Metrolinx and their contractors to undertake any noisy work before 11 o'clock. That includes drilling, excavation, any truck hauling. That is done before 11 p.m. So we've been asking them and also to put in any additional noise mitigation measures into place to reduce the noise impact on the noise-sensitive buildings.
Will there be compensation for businesses affected or perhaps accommodation arrangements made for tenants who's just simply or residents who can simply not stay in their homes? Like, is that going to be one of the requirements for the business operators along the route as well as for the residents?
Through the chair to Councillor Wong Tam, I can attest from my experience on the LRT projects, Metrolinx did have these discussions with the businesses along Eglinton Avenue, which were affected because of the construction. Similar discussions can be made on this project, but I can't speak on behalf of Metrolinx, but we can definitely have these type of discussions with them, that if these measures can be put in place on this project as well.
And do the discussions lead to outcomes? It's one thing to have a meeting and say, we talked about it, but did businesses receive any compensation, or were there perhaps some accommodations that we're aware of? And is this information made public? Will it be made public?
Through the chair to Councillor Wong Tam, I don't have that information with me right now.
Do you know how long the approximate timeline is for the construction of this project? By the time, let's say we give it the green light, it's ready to go, how long will the Ontario line be under construction?
Through the chair to Councillor Wong-Tam, I don't have the firm timeline, but I know that the construction is slated to begin in 2023 till about 2027.
4 years
4 years.
for 16 kilometers and 15 stations.
Yes. But as you know, this could change. It's just a preliminary timeline.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And are there any other questions of staff? No? Does anyone want to speak to the item? Councillor Wong-Tam?
Yeah, and I apologize. I'm regretting that Councillor Fletcher is not here because she's actually the one who took the leadership to bring this report forward and work with staff to make sure that this information is available to us. And I think rightfully so. She's advocating very hard on behalf of her residents, just as I know other affected councillors such as Councillor Cressy and myself are also doing the same thing. There are some very big, significant, illuminated, bright light question marks around the Ontario line, never mind whether or not it is the mythical creature that will never ever land and we'll never see. But if it does land, and if we do get it under construction, there is going to be significant impact along the way. And I know that the learnings we have, whether it's the Gardner construction, which in some ways is very, very far away from where the actual some of the residents live, the impact and the way the sound vibrates and moves around is just devastating for those communities. And people's mental health, their state of mind, their overall physical health has deteriorated, and it has been a constant battle. When I think about the St. Clair or the Eglinton LRT and the construction there, it has been very, very difficult for the residents, for the local councillors, for staff to try to, number one, recognize that it is a city building project and construction is needing to take place and noise and construction impact will happen. But I don't think the city has done a very good job necessarily, and Metrolinx is part of that conversation because that's their project along Eglinton. But I don't think that we've done necessarily a good job of defending the rights of the residents, and as well as trying to take into consideration, the harmful impact that this could have for business operators. We already know that retailers are under tremendous pressure. It's not just the onslaught of online shopping, but overall districts in Toronto and neighborhoods are struggling. And that could be through impact evaluations that are surging, unpredictable tax increases. And then you throw in a multi-year project right across their doorway where there's signage and their storefronts are blocked, and people are going to choose to go elsewhere. Many of these businesses simply will not survive. So my concern here is that if we can do better, I recognize that this may not be the mechanism to do that work. This may not be the policy outcome that we need because it's just a report. It doesn't recommend any enhancements or further strengthening. But I do think that we need to think through how do we ensure that residents who are going to be living with a 24-hour construction, as well as business owners who are currently struggling, how do we ensure that they are actually able to withstand and survive this critical infrastructure project so that they can see the light at the end of the day, 10 years, 15 years later, and say, we've survived the construction, we've lived through it, their children would have aged out of school and probably heading to university, and they were able to do their homework in peace and at least get a good night's sleep, including those who work shift. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak on the item? Okay, so I believe the recommendation is to receive. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Members, that takes us to the end of our scheduled business. Before we do the bills, I want to thank Carly, who's filling in for Ellen today. Carly normally administers the Scarborough Community Council. It had been my hope that we would have a good, rousing 200-item agenda for her, but she seems to have brought the workload that's typical of Scarborough with her. And also, Margaret, thank you very much for being the secretary for us today. And thanks to all members of staff. Okay, I have two bills to do. First, I move that Toronto East York Community Council pass and declare as bylaws bills 144 to 180, 182 to 184, 186 to 188, 191, and 193 to 194 prepared for the February 5th, 2020 meeting 13 of the Community Council. All those in favor, opposed, carried. And I also move that the Toronto East York Community Council pass and declare as a bylaw a confirmatory bill to confirm the legislative proceedings of the Toronto East York Community Council acting under delegated authority at meeting 13 on February 5th, 2020. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Have a wonderful afternoon. Do I have to sign minutes from last time? Normally I...